Welcome to the FRCL Weekly Call. We're a group of distribution leads who get together regularly to discuss works in progress, share ideas, and create opportunities for cross-distro collaboration.
All right, it is June 24th of 2026. We are here as Fedora and CentOS leads, and the nominal topic for today is, hey, Flock was last week. How did it go? Anything interesting come up that we should be talking about across distributions? And I have a very specific question about hardware needs, but beyond that, kind of open forum. So just show of hands, like just hit the hand button or the emoji. If you were at Flock, please like raise your hand or put your thumb up or something. All right, you got Jeff, Steph, Justin, come on. Awesome. All right, guys. Anything? And Neil, yes. All right. Neil, you were probably multitasking, eh? Okay, so for those who were there, did anything interesting come up that maybe would be of interest to anybody who wasn't there that's involved, not necessarily in Fedora, but in CentOS or RHEL? Jeff, go ahead.
The one question from the audience during the council panel that I think is relevant here, David Duncan asked a question. Please go back and watch the video. I'm going to get the wording wrong. But it was a question about comms between CentOS and Fedora contributors. And I don't think we have a good answer, right? I think Aoife's mentioned this, and I think Miro mentioned that even as a CentOS packager, he doesn't necessarily do comms in that way. So I think that's a relevant question for this group. I don't have an answer, but it was the one we probably didn't have a good answer for.
Yeah, as I recall, in the Aoife mentioned, hey, there's the FRCL thing. But I feel like this is kind of a band-aid for that. Like this is just this is where a few folks get together and share.
Yeah, this isn't. I think David was trying to talk about like peer-to-peer comms, right?
Yeah.
And this is more about this is a hammer we're throwing at the problem, right? And I don't know how to address that. But it's in scope for this group, I think.
Yeah, go ahead, Steph.
Do we link between Fedora and CentOS and RHEL visibly in our presence, in our communities? And again, I agree that we would like our contributors, especially when they're involved in multiple parts of our ecosystem, to be able to communicate with their peers across them and work across them fluently in that way. And I wonder if it starts more basic than that, with recognition that the other even exists. Now, maybe we've fixed this, and it's been a while since I looked. But the last time I looked, it was Fedora, rarely recognizes CentOS exists, and RHEL very rarely visibly recognizes that Fedora and exists, and so on. And we do in some places, talk about it, but certainly not from a user perspective. If someone comes and says, "Oh, I want to use Fedora in this way," it's like, well, maybe CentOS Stream would be better for you, or vice versa, that kind of thing. In any case, I wonder, again, I guess to poke at what Jeff brought up there, I wonder if this is a symptom of something deeper. And if not, if we say no, it isn't, then let's address it directly. But at least I thought I might bring that up, ask the question.
All right, thanks, Steph. People whose hands are up, if your name is highlighted in green, just go ahead when the previous person is finished.
So I have to ask, if we're talking about maintainers talking to each other, are we talking about at an individual package level, or are we talking at like a project level? Because I have certainly, I don't have the authority or anything to enforce this, but I've certainly encouraged and stated multiple times internally that personally, at least, I would expect that individual package maintainers in RHEL, CentOS and RHEL are equivalent in this regard, should be at least somewhat involved in their packages in Fedora because they're going to be inheriting those changes. They may or not choose to be the daily drivers of those packages in Fedora, but they should at least be aware. And if they are in that category, then every package has its built-in list, package name -maintainers at fedoraproject.org, that they can communicate among each other about their particular package. But my question is about the discussion we're having now. Are we talking about at an individual package level, or are we talking at a higher level?
Seems like it could be either. Jeff?
Yeah, we'd have to ask David to interpret his own question. I'm probably going to interpret it wrong based on his sense, but I'm assuming that it's something at the project level, something where we have like comms channels, the more organized structures to facilitate that. I want to speak to Steph's comment. Hey, I'm somewhat new back in the culture, but I get the feeling that some of this is because we want Fedora to be as vendor neutral as possible, and these particular downstreams are one vendor's part of the downstream ecosystem. And maybe we need to have an approach that works for a lot of downstreams programmatically, so this fits in the right way, in a natural way, and it doesn't feel extra special, right? And I think we've allowed we've been, I think that culturally people are very sensitive to that, and therefore we haven't been as explicit about this relationship. If that makes sense.
Yeah, to build on that, so thinking about how, on the Flock specific part, since this is the scope is around Flock, I think one of the things that we've done since bringing the event back in Cork in 2023 was adding a CentOS track. And as the event has changed and morphed, like in 2023, it was actually a dedicated room that ran the whole day, and it was just CentOS enterprise Linux content. And then this year we had some of that content, but it was interweaved into the schedule. There wasn't like a CentOS track room or content back to back, because we did have a lot of like calendaring and schedule changes that happened in the last minute. So there were various things that like we've tried to make that relationship more clear with CentOS. I think maybe there's some room to think more about for the next Flock, how could we make that relationship more visible or more strong? Because we are doing this work, but like I think what Steph points out is that it wasn't really that visible, and we didn't do a very specific job of promoting that specific part of Flock. But I think it is something we are going to have to spend time on, because from my role involved with Flock, there was a lot of interesting conversations that will happen around the packager data graph that was in the State of Fedora keynote. But just looking at the Flock level of engagement, we were at maximum capacity for this year, and we had the same venue last year in comparison with the same venue space requirements. So we were at a near full capacity event. We also had a record level amount of sponsor engagement as well. This year, I think excluding Red Hat, is 11 sponsors, including 3 completely brand new ones and some sponsors that we haven't had since the times of doing Nest. So I definitely think that's an interesting side of the engagement piece, and kind of ties into, well, how is all this downstream work visible? Because I think we are getting a more bigger visibility from our downstreams who want to show up and engage and support the community. So I think maybe it could be a useful thing to talk about how Flock could be have a better space, or do that in an inclusive way that brings folks working downstream in without necessarily changing the entire scope and purpose of the event. Over.
So to the question of lack of engagement between CentOS and Fedora, I think that this is a matter of a huge historical legacy of CentOS being downstream, with RHEL being in between Fedora and RHEL. So CentOS users, they had nothing to do no business in trying to push something to Fedora, because at best they could talk to Red Hat and see the results 5 years down the road, maybe. I think that even though the organizational order has changed in the meantime, with CentOS Stream, this is hard to overcome. Also, Red Hatters used to be, well, the most important and like the great majority of doing the great majority of work in Fedora. But those people have aged and some have stayed, but some have moved on to other things. And the new generations of Red Hatters work on other stuff, and generally seem less pushed to and less inclined to internally, within themselves and from their management, to participate in Fedora activities. I don't think that this is, for example, standard for new Red Hatters to now have to learn packaging. And I think this is also visible at Flock, where there weren't that many young, in the sense of how many years they have worked at Red Hatters. And so I think it would be great to overcome this and tie in Red Hat, especially new Red Hat employees, more closely with their upstream. And to the point about whether Red Hat would be seen as interfering too much, I don't think that this is such a big problem. Like looking at how people react, for example, to Buzzite and other, well, Microsoft and other downstreams saying that they use Fedora, I think that people in Fedora are enthusiastic about having more downstreams, and they see it as an opportunity. So I think that if the engagement is done in an open way, then it would be, I think it would be received warmly. This is not something that I would worry about. I mean, over.
Man, I was trying to get Yakov to say something first. So, so many different ways we can take this. So probably three thoughts. The first is that I took David Duncan's question as not just a Flock question, but like as an overall day-to-day sort of thing. And so like Neil mentioned in the comments that it's kind of by design that we don't have cross comms, because every space needs to make its own identity. And I think those identities are pretty well set at this point. But at the same time, like, why are we even here right now? It's because there is an opportunity to intermingle, and that could be socially, like at a Flock event. That could be technically, like mixing a little bit of Fedora with a little bit of CentOS Stream or something like that. Like our systems aren't set up for this, but it's an interesting possibility, right? To mix and match, especially if you want to do like a ELS version of Fedora or a fast moving kernel CentOS or something like that. Jeff says Apple but backwards. Yeah. So I don't know. It seems to me like we have a lot more in common than different. Like the version of Bash in any one of our distros, it's pretty much the same Bash, right? So why do we have these barriers? I think we needed them, but maybe we also need some tunnels and conduits.
Just to say that the fast-moving kernel for CentOS is the server SIG stuff.
Yakov, go ahead.
I mean, if you're talking specifically about, Red Hat package maintainers' involvement in things like Flock, well, that's connected to travel. And I'm not much fun to travel myself, but I know others that would have liked to have been there and couldn't go this year for reasons. If we want to see more Red Hatters at events like Flock, it has to be, it would come with Red Hat committing to actually send people to go there, because I don't know that a lot of people are going to spend their own money to go there, particularly when it's cross-continental. Flock this year was in Europe, even though the alternating schedule should have had it in North America, but I don't know what went into that. Maybe there needs to be more regional things if travel is going to be an issue in the future, but that's a different discussion. But if you want to see Red Hatters at Flock interacting with Fedora contributors, that's kind of on Red Hat to provide that to send people there, because I don't know that you expect people to go on their own.
Well, okay, but to ask a pointed question, there's how many thousand Red Hatters in Brno? They could flood Flock for the price of a train ticket one way, right? We could have 2,000 people from Czech Republic and another 500 from Germany and so on.
And I think a lot of the Europeans on my team, or a number of the Europeans on my team, did go to Flock, I believe. I'm not much in travel. I haven't been there, so I can't tell you. Not everybody that works in Brno works on RHEL. Sometimes they work on other projects where they're not directly interacting with. If you're working on OpenShift, probably not necessarily having a lot to do with the packages in Fedora itself, or in RHEL itself. So, but I don't know. I guess so. It's people that are local. I can't speak to that.
I mean, it will be really interesting to see the statistics on this, because I think that speculating based on the I don't even know all the people, so I had the feeling that at this Flock I really knew a lot of faces, but I mean, for example, I went to Flock and to DEF CONF, and DEF CONF was completely different. It was much more varied. But like, if we had statistics, that then we could, well, not instead of speculating, do decisions or discussions based on data.
Culture inertia is a thing. I'm wondering if perhaps Hummingbird might be a useful cultural lever to change the behavior. Because at the end of the day, a lot of these processes and workflows have been around for 20-ish years. And right, wrong, or indifferent, inertia is part of every corporate identity. And if perhaps Hummingbird might be a tool to use to begin shifting that mentality.
Go ahead, Andre.
Okay, yeah, just need to comment on the idea to invite more folks from Brno to Flock. I think it could have advantages. I remember the time when generally the whole Brno office went to, was it maybe FATCon Berlin a long time ago, or when we had the first FATCon in Prague, and it provided, generally a lot of good development opportunities, networking opportunities to the folks there. But similar taken that on DEF CONF. So actually what the folks appreciated on Flock, and we actually, my group have the privilege to kind of almost whole team event to Flock this year, and the excellent feedback. What folks appreciated, that thanks for Flock being reasonable size, it's almost like you are able to talk with everyone in the rooms, or like on the corridor, and by keeping this reasonable size, it's still kind of pleasant to keep in touch with a lot of the folks who are there. Well, DEF CON is already bigger, and even hard to imagine the intention to meet everyone and talk to everyone. So it's a bit different, maybe concept, but both concepts seems to work and kind of complemented each other this year. So it was nice. But I think, yeah, a lot of folks in Brno contribute to Fedora, especially Fedora developers working in CentOS stream in Fedora. There are maybe 200 to 300 of them around in Czech Republic.
So I think it's probably worth pointing out that the day after Flock ended, DevConf CZ began. Also, we have talked about, some of us anyway, have talked about should Flock or other events, should we be more present in APAC? It has a lot of people, and we don't do a lot of events there. There's DevConf India, but like, should Flock just be attached to DevConfs, like Flock days? And feels sort of similar to the, should there be a vendor or a downstream day at Flock for CentOS and Microsoft and Amazon? Like, what we've done doesn't have to be what we do in the future. Gosh, up Europe.
Yeah, it's not directly related to the point you're just making, but more on the discussion in the chat about funding and Red Hatters going to community events. Those who've been around for a little while will know there are a dime a dozen of events. Events are many of them, but which are the high value events where you can make the best impact for yourself and the communities you're involved in? That's a choice that requires restraint and careful selection. Just going for the lulz is not an option anymore. It was in the past for some people. The reality is different now. So it's a careful choice. You can't get to be everywhere. Where can you maximize your impact? So that's a question we all have to ask ourselves. I'm addressing Neil's point there. Yeah, as to budgets, I've been very lucky. I know I can only speak for myself, that Red Hat has been very supportive in all the events that I had to be in. And I also sometimes opted out because I was asked to go to some events, and then I simply said, I don't need to be there, and this budget could be used for someone else. So it's more complicated than just going to events.
Yes, but if the blocker is money, then I think that we have not exhausted the efficiency of having Flock in the middle of Europe, where people, I mean, at least the travel cost for most people is in the order of, let's say, 70 euros and one way. So I don't know, like, I think that if money was a barrier, then in this case, this is not enough to explain.
Right. I think what Brandon was saying is something to be thought out, I guess, whether Flock should be combined with DevConf or not. I haven't thought through this thing, so I can't say.
So for people who travel from overseas, the answer is definitely yes. And for people who don't want to go to both, then I think it doesn't matter, right? So
the answer is yes to what?
They should be combined, right? Because if you are traveling long distance, then it makes it vastly easier and cheaper.
Yeah, but maybe it's just my personal view, but the longer a person travels, the more, if I'm traveling a longer distance, the more I scrutinize myself about the value I'm trying to provide from that travel. It's maybe it's just a personal standard. Brandon, go on.
Yeah, I think the question is, what do you get for your travels? What do you get for having in-person events? And are we doing the things that we need to do? Like, where are we doing the most important stuff right now? I think, like, based on Jeff's data, based on Jeff's slides from the presentation, we are slowly losing contributors. Like, the number of users is going up, the number of contributors is going down. The math for that leads to a very bad place where there are a lot of users and no contributors. So we don't want to get there. So I think one thing that we should be trying to do and trying to get from travel and other activities is growth in contributors. That's not even just a Fedora proposition. Like, I think more CentOS SIGs would be good. I think more robust management of CentOS as a whole would be good, because CentOS SIGs are awesome. We're just not, I don't think we're taking advantage of the goodness that they provide. Jeff, go ahead.
Okay, I got to caveat that because you mentioned that graph. That was specifically like, I believe it was commits from a packager point of view. It's one type of contribution. I actually had gone back and asked Michael to give me the dumbest view of contribution, which is the widest activity. So I want to ground truth that. That was the first graph. There are like 80 more questions that we can ask from the data source that he's helped put together that I want to ask. So the fact that Flock was well attended and it seems to be growing in attendance over the last 3 years or 4 years is naively for me an opposite signal to that graph. So I have to try to figure it out, because I would expect that Flock would attract the technical contributions that graph spoke to. But if we're having more people attend Flock, but we have that graph showing downward trends, that's not a consistent story in my head yet. So I need to ask more questions before so we can narrow down the problem. But yeah, caveats.
Yeah, I think this was probably like most interesting and commented part of your presentation. And I think, yeah, it would be great to see some breakdowns of the data you've shown, like what kind of contributors are we losing? Are we losing Red Hat employees contributing to Fedora, or like who are those folks? Like maybe break down by tenure in Fedora community or anything like that would be really interesting to kind of address the root causes later.
Yeah. Also, how many people attend Flock could just be a proxy for other things, like, oh, flights are really expensive right now. I'm not going to go to this conference on the other side of the world. I will go to Flock instead. Could be a thing. Or maybe we advertised more. Like, I think we're going to learn a lot from the contributor survey that Justin posted.
Yeah, I think the number one question I've been asked repeatedly after that was the breakdown of Red Hat versus external community in that. And honestly, I don't know if we can answer that question from that data source. We don't have a good sense of who is who, I think. But it's an important question, because that tells me if I have to build an outreach program internally inside the vendor, that looks like a vendor engagement strategy that I can then take to other vendors, right? Versus a community outreach thing where we need to do something with events. I don't want to throw darts. I want to figure it out and build the right programmatic things to address. So we have to answer the question. I just don't know if this data source does it, but I want to figure it out. I think to get a handle on the Red Hat question, we might just need to have a vendor engagement strategy anyway, so we can do better accounting of who's showing up as a paid employee from different vendors, so we can get a more holistic look at that. Like I said, I'm expecting we're going to start seeing Microsoft trickle in now, right? And I want to see how they show up, and I want to make sure they show up in the right way, and I want to make sure that we re-engage with Red Hat and engage with teams that aren't showing up, right? But it might require us to have some governance changes, so we're asking vendor employees to identify themselves so we can keep up with that stat. And I don't know if as a project we want to do that, but I think if we want to answer the question, we need to do that.
So it sounds like we could do a survey for all people in the Red Hat space and ask them if they went to Flock, and if they didn't go to Flock, and we'll actually a survey for people who didn't go to Flock, why they didn't, and like 5 questions, like 3 questions. Why, if they didn't go because of money, because of time, or because of distance, or some other reason, and what are they doing, and where they're employed, and in general, and then we would know much more than we know now.
So we seem to have a lot of thoughts and feelings about Flock and about events. We just had one. I mean, technically we had two, and I think some of y'all were at DevConf CZ as well. So at the event, did anything come up that you think, oh man, I wish the CentOS people had been here for that, or I wish the Fedora people had been here for that, or God, RHEL needs to know this. Why don't they know this? Like, Bishop.
I don't know if this will check that box, but what I found really interesting is the timelines mentioned in Alexander Bokovoy's talk on post-quantum cryptography. He highlighted in several things where some of the deadlines are coming fast. What was supposed to be 3 years is now 2 years. Some of the certificates involved the public keys and the private keys for these new kind of digital certificates. They're called Berkeley tree certificates, MTC, and the sizes are longer for the public keys and private keys. There's a lot of details here, and the 2 years will fly by in cryptography land quicker than we would think. So I would. So that was for me very interesting. And Kevin Fenzi was also there in that session. So I think if he's around here, I don't know. His take is also interesting in this matter. He was concerned for sure with respect to the timelines involved from the hallway chat. This is not recorded, right? Yeah, so maybe more exposure to that would be interesting / useful.
Yeah, Simone, go for it.
Yeah, the PQC thing is really a thing where there needs to be more coordination between RHEL, CentOS, Fedora. It basically landed in RHEL first. Fedora's crypto libraries can't deal with it. CentOS came later. Like, it was a total inversion, and it broke. I work on Image Builder. It broke our ability to be able to cross-build RHEL on Fedora or CentOS on Fedora for a while. And I think that not just for PQC, but that's an interesting thing that we see a bit of an inversion where things happen in RHEL first. Same with, I guess, Hummingbird. And then later it makes it to Fedora because there you have to you deal with external contributors and it takes longer. I wonder if there's a way to find something to revert that back so we can do things in Fedora first before they go into CentOS and then RHEL.
So on the PQC topic in particular, we actually ended up talking about that right ahead of OSDOM, and Clemens did a lot of cleanup at FOSDEM because of the unintended consequences of that. And when we looked through it seemed like the answer was twofold. One was that, yeah, it really did need to happen in RHEL first, just because of the life cycle of RHEL versus the life cycle of Fedora. But at the same time, there should have been a consultation with the package maintainers in Fedora that would eventually be affected, because they thought that they had done an assessment of what the consequences would be for cross-distro use, and they got one thing wrong, and that is unfortunate. But I think all that really was needed was to say, hey, we're doing this thing in RHEL, and we think we've done the assessment, but here's the deal, and our plan is to change proposal in Fedora 45. But we think we're not going to break anything. If anything comes up, let us know. I think that would have actually covered it, because there are going to be times that RHEL does have to do things first. Like, otherwise, it's not an innovation space for customers. But Fedora can't be the sole innovation space. But I think it needs to be the default one, and we probably need to do better at that. Go ahead, Simone.
Yeah, for PQC, as far as I'm aware, RHEL had to do it before the end of the year. Things can't get merged in Fedora yet because they're not standardized. They're basically a patch set that was merged into RHEL to make it work. And it will just take longer in Fedora. So it's probably a good example of something that did need the inversion. The effect on the ecosystem, though, was, at least from my side, where we build images on different hosts and stuff, was pretty severe. Like, it definitely cost us. And a bunch of our customers, because I got to see all the issues, big issues for a while.
Yeah, it kind of reinforces David Duncan's question, right? Like right back to the beginning. Kashyap.
Yeah, just a quick note. This talk by Alexander Bokovoy and Jakub on PQC was rejected at first. It got in because something else didn't get through. So I was kind of quite surprised for such an important topic that it kind of got dropped on the floor. Maybe he just needs to up his marketing game, Alexander. But yeah, more seriously, I think there should be some kind of tech talk or something that could span across, because Alexander is really well versed in this topic. He's the expert. It's a UU-funded project partly as well. There's a complex agreement between Red Hat and this body, whatever, that is funding it in EU. That legal stuff, the core technical matters are very interesting for developer types, and could be beneficial for to have a tech talk of something of some sort by Alexander. So,
right, so
I suggested to him as much to provide it to RHEL developers as well, but could be a broader one that includes Fedora and CentOS ecosystem.
Okay, so pro tip for presenters: if you're not sure that you're gonna like meet the bar for your CFP, then just go ahead and break your package while they're evaluating, and then there'll be a lot of attention on it, and then they'll be like, yeah, we should totally approve that one so we can sort it out. Then fix your thing after you get the approval. This is not legal advice. Okay, so question for those who were at Flock. Did anything come up about things we want to do in the Fedora space that will require equipment? So as I mentioned 2 calls ago, we're coming up on 2027 budgeting for all operations hardware, like all our infrastructure. And so I would like to make sure that I have everything lined up for what people are going to want and need for Fedora, for CentOS, etc. But since we're talking about Flock, mostly Fedora. Justin, go ahead.
Yeah, so one of the things that, I'm not sure if Gordon is also here on the call today or not, but one of the things in the AI/ML SIG that we've been working on is figuring out what kind of workloads we're going to be running on that new GPU 01 node in the infrastructure. And already it's going to cause some interesting conversations on access and like who gets to run workloads on this. Like, for instance, the challenge we're already starting to run into is that we have a outreachy intern who will be trying to use some of this hardware to do RAG training with some of the like Fedora RPM packaging guidelines and RPM documentation for some experimental, like using Ramalama to do some RAG training specifically on Fedora trusted data sources and to see what we get out of that. But then we also have the AMD folks who are very keen on using some of this hardware for improving CI on some of these GPUs and hardware. And they're specifically I know the AMD folks like Tim Flink and Tom Ricks, I think, are trying to spin up some of this work in late July, getting into the Fedora 45 release cycle. So I think the ask for me is not saying that we like add a huge GPU capex to the expense, but it might be worth like thinking about having different machines or thinking about how we segment that kind of work out for things that are more ephemeral workloads that might be like CI or it's spun up and it's done and it's more about testing that actual hardware and making sure that Fedora works well on it. And that's work that the AMD folks, like I think they were involved with giving us the GPU we have already. But then also things that might be less ephemeral, things that will be, I mean, even for this RAG training, there's not really it could be ephemeral, but it'll take maybe longer time. So we don't know yet for sure how much time it's going to take with different models to do some of this work, but that could be challenging if we're all sharing the same GPU, and some people are doing more ephemeral workloads that are really like bench testing the hardware versus people that are using that hardware to do AI type workloads and this kind of stuff that GPU hardware really enables us to do. So just want to put that one out there because we were just talking about that in the AI/ML SIG last week as we're trying to figure out how we get onto that hardware and getting some stuff actually running on it. But I do expect that we'll need to have more conversations about equitable access to that kind of hardware. Over.
Yeah, that one is definitely on my list. And in fact, it has been for a while now. We had this thing happen 2 years ago where we were offered all of these like top tier GPUs specifically for inference and learning acceleration, and we didn't have systems to put them in. So we are planning on getting a small set of systems that we can put cards into without necessarily having an opinion about what cards should be there. So the cards that AMD provided, our first test system has those cards, and I'm hoping to get more of them, more systems at the beginning of next year. But we're talking about a pretty small number. So if my plan is like this big, and the thing that people are talking about is this big, I would need to know it needs to be this big and not this big.
Yeah, I imagine part of the challenge with that hardware is a lot of people are still figuring out what exactly we can use that for beyond some of the more traditional CI stuff that like the AMD folks were really keen on. But I think it's the way that we share those resources and how we distribute. Like maybe we need to think more about how CommuniShift allocation works, because right now you can just get, like if we want to do experimental stuff with AI workloads, CommuniShift just gives you 5 gigabytes of disk space, 1 gigabyte of RAM, and you have to renew it every 6 months. So that might be something we have to think about if we want, people to be able to do experimental stuff and to try things out that we don't necessarily want to throw into production infrastructure yet, or could, have a negative impact on the day-to-day packager workflow if we're not totally confident in that. We have no good way to structure experimental GPU workloads right now.
Yeah. How do you see that resolving, Justin?
Well, I think the AI/ML SIG is starting because a lot of the AMD folks who helped with that, not to get too much on this specific arrangement with this GPU, but I think what I would like to see is probably a world where there's some specific amounts of that hardware that's allocated for specific like quality folk. Like I'd probably want to make sure like Adam Williamson and some of the QA, the various Fedora quality folks are engaged in that and thinking about how that can fit into their work cases with like what the AMD folks want to do with CI and benchmarking on the hardware. But then I think we need to have like a pool that's deliberately for community experimentation. And I think CommuniShift has the right framework for people to request that. But we just, this is where I'd probably lean on someone like, Kevin or Greg to really speak towards how we could like equitably split up hardware, or if we can have, different allocations of that GPU for different users or groups, like some kind of CommuniShift framework for how we let people have access to that GPU hardware. And maybe it's not a 6-month window. Maybe it's like you get this GPU for a week or for 2 weeks, and then you've got to give it up, if you're just testing something out. That might also be part of how we need to think about how that kind of hardware is made available with our existing process with stuff like CommuniShift.
Mm-hmm.
Over.
Jeff, go for it.
Hey, is that something that we could ask the existing AI SIG to think about the best way to implement that kind of sharing in our GPU infrastructure?
I have to imagine the AMD folks have some opinions on how to do that, but it's going to require some liaison work between the folks that know the hardware and Fedora infra folks that have, sysadmin main and can do stuff with how CommuniShift instances are provisioned. So there's a necessary like collaboration that's probably there. I mean, I would lean on probably some of our infra folks know a little bit more about, having tenants for different hardware. Like it's not a particular part of the stack that I'm as deep in, but I know it's possible and there's ways to do it. But I'm sure the AMD folks would be happy to.
Yeah, let's just put a straw proposal out that we know is wrong, right? And get the SIG to weigh in and infrastructure to weigh in to, just so we get the conversation started, right? There's something in what you said that's super interesting, but both you and I are not the people for the implementation, right? So let's throw something out and get people talking so they have the correct domain expertise about it, right? Because I don't want to put this all in the infrastructure people because they don't understand the workloads, right?
Yeah, well, just thinking on the CapEx end of things, knowing that these conversations tend to have long arcs, like I think that the short-term thing is figuring out how we balance ephemeral workloads with things that maybe need more intense compute time for shorter windows of time than a release cycle. And that's something I think we would need some guidance from infra, because it's essentially the infrastructure allocation with everything else that we're doing. So I don't want to speak on behalf of any of those folks, of course.
No, we throw a bad idea out there and we see how people make it better.
Okay.
I'll do it.
For scale, I'm thinking like 4 or 5 systems total. So if anybody wants to bring this topic up with interested parties, that's kind of what I'm anticipating we'll be able to get through. But if that's completely insufficient, then that'd be good to know. And if people are like, oh, we don't need that much, that'd be good to know too, because RAM's expensive, man. Cash up, go ahead.
No, I'll get to it once you wrap up the AI hardware needs. I have another RISC-V hardware point to mention.
Yeah. Okay. So here's what's on my list right now. The AI systems, as mentioned, RISC-V builder hardware, as soon as it becomes unobtainium, and S390 resources. That's being handled else in a different way, but that's on my list because I know it's a source of pain. So beyond that, it's going to be like hardware refreshes of stuff that's aging out and no longer warranted, unless new information comes in. So, and since we are just about out of time, I want to encourage you to bring me new information if you have it or if you hear about it, and that will make it easier for us to say yes next year when people are like, "Hey, can we get some of this?" I'm like, "Yes, we anticipated your need." You can send it to me directly, Yakov, or you can bring it up in this call. You know what? I'll create a ticket for it, and I'll point the ticket in the Freckle channel, and then you can add stuff there. Yeah, go ahead.
I thought in a previous meeting, there was a discussion about having some sort of dedicated issue tracker for those kind of requests. What happened with that?
Oh, that's right. Tomasz set something up. Let me go back and check on that, because that would be even better. You're right. Okay, I'll post a pointer to the thing that he set up. Thank you for the reminder.
Yeah, just to wrap my point, it's in the ticket that I linked there, also in the doc. We already have 2 latest hardware builders in the Koji RISC-V Koji build pool. Both of them are currently community contributed, but 2 Red Hat funded machines are on their way. So yeah, this is all a prerequisite towards getting into primary Koji, which will take several months or longer. So meanwhile, we have to get these machines going and get the builds consistently so that it catch up with the primary architectures. So yeah, for now we have a couple, but we need to parallelize more. So we'll bring more specifics as we know. And this is not on Optimium, so it is already available. This is not a rackable thing that will end up in Fedora DC. That will require another generational leap. So that could be anywhere in the next 14 months or less. So for now, we're maintaining momentum with what we have.
All right. Thanks, Kashan. right, so we're at the top of the hour. Sounds like it was a good conference, but not a lot of, oh my God, we're going to retool the world across the distributions kind of conference. So maybe we save that for next year. Okay, so if you have thoughts on things that you'd like to dig into next week or thereafter, feel free to add an epic or just let me know. I'll create one for you, and we'll talk about it next week. It seemed like the travel topic, I think it'd be interesting to maybe talk about what are the high value things for us as three communities to get together on and prioritize. It's like clearly Flock is one of those. I feel like DevConf is one of those, but maybe there's a few others that we should all agree this is the sort of stuff that Red Hat should be prioritizing, or CLE should be prioritizing, or something like that. Like, let's make plans together. So give that some thought. I'll put it on the list of epics, and we will talk about it in the near future. Thanks, everybody. I'll see you later. Bye.
Thanks, Brian.
Bye.
Bye.